Junk Art. This is a stacking game, and like many games of this kind, it can be played with younger players as a family game. I played it with my kids who are now 9 and 11. We had a friend over, she's 10, so definitely you can play it with that constituency, and I was playing it also, mind you, and I think it's a fun game. Now, in this game, we are junk artists. We'll travel the world, putting together different exhibits. Wherever we go in the world, we'll find junk that we have the compulsion of piling up into very artistic but also very wobbly structures. What is unusual in the structure of the game is actually precisely the fact that as we travel the world, we are basically playing different mini games. The game does not have a single, say, script that you will use every time, but using the components in the box, you will play 3 mini games each time. These are the cards that indicate the mini games you'll be playing. You shuffle, 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 draw 3 of them face up so people know what's coming next, and you play the first, then the second, then the third. You will score points, and at the end, the player with the most points wins the game. Just as simple as that. Simple, but again, that means that, especially if you're playing with young players, the first time that a minigame comes up, you have to teach it to them. So there's a little bit more of learning at the beginning. But it also, I didn't find that the level of difficulty was excessive at all. Also, some of these games are very reminiscent of games that you probably already know. In one game, you'll basically be playing trick-taking games, and the result of the trick indicates who is gonna place which pieces where. In another game, you have cards, and you're basically playing Sushi Go. You select a card for yourself, and you pass the other cards to the next player, reveal it, and then you place the corresponding piece on a structure. And so you have these cards, again, that will match these wooden pieces here. And the wooden pieces, I mix them all up because you could separate them by color. It is 4 sets of 15 pieces each, all the same, distinguished by color. But in many of the mini games, they are not going to be separated. You put a big bunch in the middle of the table, and then you flip a card, you draw a card, you receive a card, and then you look for the corresponding piece. And sometimes, again, looking for the piece in the big mess is part of the game. In some of the games, each player does have a specific set, and then if you're playing that game, and that game only, we are gonna do that. Indianapolis, for example, is one that I like very much, in which you will be creating your own structure on this plastic mini base. Again, not every game has that. Sometimes not every player has a single mini base. Sometimes there's one in the middle and everybody's building on that one. So players will receive 10 cards from this deck, and then each player reveals one at the same time, reveals one from the top of the deck, looks for it from the big bunch here, takes it and places it on the structure and says, done. And when everybody but one has done that, then the round is over. So basically each round, all players but one will get to place a piece because it's Indianapolis. You gotta be fast. And then maybe the next one that they get is this one. So I quickly go and look for it, and I place it like that, for example. And that's probably a terrible placement because it'll make it harder for me to continue, and so on and so forth. And so these mini games are just different. They play different rules. They score differently. Say sometimes it's about who is the last player standing, who hasn't been eliminated. Some of the times when a player is eliminated, that triggers the end game, and then you evaluate the game, the structures in terms of points in different ways. For example, tallest structure, and that's why you have this little measuring tape here. This one is one of those where everybody will be playing with their own colors, and Tokyo is the Sushi Go kind of thing. So different mini games, of course. These icons, we don't need to know what they do just yet, but the rulebook will tell you what they correspond to. So there isn't really much to go in detail here because, again, I covered the game, but I don't want to cover all the mini games because that would be would take me forever. So what I'm gonna do instead, I'm just gonna put a bunch of pieces there just to have some fun with them. And also to show you that these pieces, well, I don't know that I know there is a standard of the way pieces look like in stacking games, but if there is such a standard, it ain't this one. These pieces just look very different from what I expect or from what I'm seeing in a lot of other stacking games. And of course, because you have these different mini games, you will have a very different flow from game to game, because you will have some games that have an element of a little bit cutthroat, especially if you are giving your some of the cards to the next player, and the next player will have to take that cards, and of course you want to get them stuck with something that sucks a little bit. Some of the times you want to go fast. Some of the times it doesn't matter so much. You want to be super careful. I guess there are scenarios where you could have a little bit of king making. If, for example, one player knows they're not gonna score anymore, and so they just destroy their things, so that brings the end of the game soon, and that gets somebody in trouble and gives victory to somebody else. I don't play that way. I don't like to think about it that way. I don't think it's gonna be very likely. So as we played with my kids and with this friend that was visiting, we're having a good time. Some games, some people liked more than others. I wasn't a big fan of the games where it is last player standing, so when somebody's eliminated, they are simply eliminated, and they sit there until everybody else is done. That doesn't happen too often, and of course the game is not so long that it causes a problem. But that's it. I wanted to keep going because I wanted to show an example of human hubris. So, it may happen, yes, that a game has his direct elimination and the player is going to sit there for like 5 minutes or so. So it's not going to be too long. It's not going to be too terrible. I do find, again, there is just an element of randomness about the kind of mini-games that can come out, which is not my favorite part of the game. I like variety, but I like a little more structure. And mind you, again, it's a fun game. We enjoyed it. It's just that I happen to have played other stacking games, including recently, such as Men at Work, that just felt a little more engaging. It's just not for me personally. That my favorite games are not so much about rinse and repeat, but especially when it comes to stacking games, about the epic construction that is created. Men at Work, for example, gives me that. Junk Art, you have more of these like bursts of activity. Which again, sometimes you realize that the last round, simply there aren't enough points available for somebody to catch up. Because again, different mini games will score you in different ways, different amount of points. And so sometimes the last round will feel a little bit anticlimactic, which may happen. But again, it means 5 minutes. So it's just a game where there is variety, which is good in games, but sometimes that variety, I don't know, doesn't really add to the experience as much as I like to. It's nicely produced, the wooden pieces are really nice, the cards are perfectly serviceable, nothing to complain about in terms of design, in terms of material production. It's a perfectly valid stacking games. There are just other ones that in terms of flow, I prefer better because they have a bigger narrative. It gets more to like an epic thing. And again, you have variants of those games that also will add variety. The variety of Junk Art is perfectly fine. Again, not my favorite thing, but nothing wrong with this game. And for some, again, the idea of like quick mini games with that level of difference from each game, that will be more appealing to them. So that's my assessment of Junk Art. It's a perfectly fun, absolutely enjoyable stacking game. It's not my favorite, just again, maybe because I happen to play one that I liked a lot more recently, Men at Work. But it's a perfectly fine stacking game.